Evening, folks. Got more alien chronicles for you here tonight. I'm going to call this one Hunting Aliens with the FBI. And this is another pretty unnerving story for me to have the FBI show up. So, anyhow, it was just a typical summer day, and I'd been out fencing or doing something all day, but I'd been away from the house all day long, come back just about dusk. And I was more than a little apprehensive about strangers or vehicles or lights or anything else after the things that went on out there. So I just come into the yard and pull up in front of my house to park, and there's this guy in front of my personal truck, and I had an SUV parked next to it, and he's messing with the front of my trucks. And I jumped out pretty aggressive. I'm usually a pretty easygoing guy, but after having aliens in your refrigerator and doing all this weird stuff, you get a little more intense. Boy, I bowled up and come running out of that truck and asked this guy, "Who the hell are you and what are you doing with my trucks?" And he opens up his pocket and pulls out an FBI badge, and it just knocked the wind out of me, of course. And I said, "Well, what the hell are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm putting trackers on your vehicle." And "What do you mean you're putting trackers on my vehicle?" So he explained what was going on. He said they'd been sent out there because they'd heard about all this stuff that was going on. He never said the word alien, but he said, "We're here to see if we can help find out what's killing your buffalo." I thought, "Oh, great." I said, "What are those things on my truck?" And they weren't any bigger than a pencil eraser. And they were these little magnetic things. He just dropped them and they stuck to the bumper. And it turns out they had a fixed-wing aircraft up all night, 12 hours, flying circles around that 15,000-acre ranch. And they had some kind of receiver in there. 2 FBI, well, 1 agent and 1 pilot. I don't know if he was an agent. And they flew around that ranch all night. And these little trackers on our personal vehicles were for them to tell if we were friendlies or bad guys if I was out driving around or headed to town or whatever. So we talked a little bit, and he was very reticent. He didn't want to give me any information, and a lot of cops are like that, and I've dealt with the FBI a time or two in my sordid past, and they're just not chatty. So he tells me what they're doing, and there was also 2 more agents, both in a separate pickup truck, dressed like old cowboys driving the county roads all night, so they were seriously there to help us. So I didn't think too much about it. He goes out to the shop, and that's where he's going to hide all night, and I go in and go on back to bed. Next morning and get up and talk with him a little bit more, and I'm telling him stories of what's happened and this and that, and he loosened up a little bit, and he managed to make this one remark to me somewhere in that conversation. He says, "If you catch one of them sons of bitches, we'll have them all in jail by dark." And I bowed up and got in his face, and I said, "You son of a bitch, you know what's happening out here, don't you?" And he realized he'd kind of overstepped his bounds, and he just clammed up. And I said a few more things, and he walked over to that shop, got in his car, drove away. I never saw him again. I never saw any of those other agents that were driving around, and that was it with the FBI. So I go in the house, and I call my buddy Wally, the sheriff in town, because he'd been out there for 3, 4, 5 years helping us chase those lights at night. Get him on the phone, and I said, "Wally, what's going on?" I said, "What do you know about all these FBI guys being out here camped out all night?" And he goes, "What?" He was incredulous that nobody had told him a word. He had no idea that there were federal agents out there that night. And he was kind of incensed about that because a sheriff in a county has a lot more power than most people realize. A sheriff is the only law enforcement in the country that can actually shut down an interstate highway. The FBI can't do that, a Metropolitan Police Department can't do it, but a sheriff can. So he was a little bent out of shape that nobody told him, and nothing come of it. I mean, they were there for one night. He kind of let the bean slip a little bit, and I called him out on it, and that was it with the FBI, and nobody ever knew who called him. The office in town, the owners, the ranch manager, nobody had a clue. Hell, as far as I know, they might have been fake FBI, but anyway, that's the FBI story. So about a week goes by after that, and these 2 guys pull in the yard, and they're obviously in a rental vehicle. And again, I'm not being very friendly. I go up and go, "What do you want and why are you here?" And they showed me their credentials, and I said, "Why are you here?" And they said, "A federal agency has flown us out here, and we want to take necropsy samples on a mutilated buffalo." And I'm thinking, "Well, who are you guys?" And they showed me their paperwork, and they were both professors from a university in Michigan. I can't remember which one, but these guys were the real deal, you know, and laid back and comfortable chatting with me and stuff. And so I tell them, I said, your timing's impeccable. We just had a buffalo cow mutilated about 3 nights ago, and she's still laying out there. So I got in the truck, and I said, follow me, and we'll go out there and get what you need. So I took an axe and a chainsaw, and I split the jaw open and opened it up. And of course, I always took the tongues out of bowls, but this was a cow, so they wanted samples of her tongue, and she had that elliptical cut with her reproductive organs gone. And I went ahead and opened her up and pulled all her guts out, and they took liver and spleen and all kinds of tissue samples. Diaphragm, they wanted part of the diaphragm muscle. So we get all this put together for them in their little sealed forensic bags. And I said, you guys want to see all the rest of the dead ones? Because, I don't know, probably 4 years worth of dead buffalo. We just drive them over to a coulee and drag them in there and let them lay. Now, the funny thing about them dead buffalo, anything else that you died, a buffalo that broke its neck in the squeeze chute or hit by lightning or whatever, you drag them into that boneyard, and the coyotes would come in and eat them, and of course the blowflies would lay eggs, and they'd be covered with maggots. Well, every one of those mutilated buffalo that had mutilations and the orange triangles never had a fly lay an egg, and I never saw a single bite mark. And you see all these other alien stories where the sheriff comes out and he goes, oh, this is caused by a predator, and this is a coyote bite, and this is a raccoon. Well, I don't know how they tell, and I've been cutting up dead animals for many years, but they never touch these mutilated ones. And what would happen, the skin would just dry on them, and they ended up looking like Egyptian mummies after a year or two. All the tissue still in there dried, but nothing ever took a bite of those mutilated buffalo. And for a fly not to lay an egg on a dead animal is beyond me. But anyway, I show them all that stuff, and they're all happy, got their samples and stuff, and they go home. And I said, the only thing I'll ask you guys is contact me. Let me know what you find out. Because, you know, obviously the FBI didn't. And we had so many different people out there over the years. Somebody brought us a medicine man because they thought maybe the Indians were upset about having buffalo behind a fence instead of running wild. And the buffalo said, none of these symbols have anything to do with our tribe. And I forget all the experts that came out there and never figured anything out. So about a month or two goes by, and one of those professors contacts me, God bless him, and he said, yeah, we ran a lot of tests, and he says, we got some pretty strange results. And I said, what are they? Well, he gives me all these medical terms, which meant nothing to me. But he said the blood was toxic. Well, if you run a buffalo hard enough, or an antelope, any animal that runs long enough till its heart finally explodes, their blood is toxic, and you don't want to eat that meat. So the blood's toxic, and I'm thinking, well, that could be aliens, or it could just be run to death or whatever. And then he talked about a lot of the organs, how this was different, that was different, crystalline structures in the meat and stuff I didn't understand. And we get to the end of his explanation, and he says, well, one thing I do want to tell you, that elliptical cut on the belly of those cows, I told you in other stories, one side was clean as a whistle, no blood, cut with a scalpel, and the other side was crusty and burnt and ragged all the way down. He said, we tested 4 different places because he took that whole piece of hide out. And he said, we don't know what caused it, but when hemoglobin is heated to over 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit, something happens to its structure. And he said, every sample we had shows that hemoglobin was heated to over 1,100 degrees. So I said, well, who has a laser like that? Was it a laser? And he goes, we assume it was to generate that kind of heat. And I said, okay, who has those kind of lasers? He said, well, we did some checking, and the U.S. Army has one that'll generate that kind of power, but it takes 2 semi and flatbed trailers to haul it out in the field. And like I said, we never found a track. So again, just another one of the great mysteries of the Alien Chronicles. And God bless those guys for getting back to me and giving me that info. So then another week or two goes by, all in this same summer, and this old cowboy calls me up, and he's older than I am now. He's an old duffer, and he's getting married for the first time, and he wants me to come to his bachelor party at a ranch. And, oh, I just love this old man to death, but you got to understand, here's 2 young guys living on a $1 million buffalo ranch with a $3 million herd, driving new pickup trucks, new tractors. Them old ranchers that were all our neighbors, they hated us. They've been living hand to mouth, working 7 days a week, 380 days a year, their whole lives, and we come in with all this money. It wasn't my money, but they put this ranch together, and we got the best of everything. And of course, our buffalo always getting loose and tearing down their fences and running through their cows. So I don't think we were very popular with all the neighbor ranchers anyway. But I wanted to go to this bachelor party, so I did, and I thought, boy, am I going to take some heat? Because you got to remember, all these stories with the sheriff's department involved ended up in the newspaper, because that's what small towns do on their police report. Everything's in there. So everybody in the country knew we had aliens and lights and mutilations, and, you know, a lot of people look askance at you and don't believe in any of that. So I go to this bachelor party thinking, I'm going to get beat up bad by all these old rancher types tonight, and I get talking to my buddy that's getting married, and he introduces me around, and they're all very friendly, and finally the subject comes up. And one of them looks at me and he says, well, hell, he says, that mutilation stuff doesn't have anything to do with you guys and your buffalo. He says, that crap's been going on here for the 35 years that I've grown up on this place. And I just, what? And then they all started telling stories, and of course nobody had buffalo back then, but there was not a rancher in that bachelor party, and I'll bet there was 18, 20 men in there, all in their 60s or older, and every one of them had a story to tell about cattle or horse mutilations. So anyway, this stuff's been going on a lot longer than the 9 years I tell you about these spooky buffalo encounters.